Welcome to the Healers Café, conversations on health and healing with Dr. Manon.
So, welcome to the Healers Café, and today I have with me Joseph Devlin. And let me tell you a little bit about him. He's a respected behavioral health expert with more than 20 years of experience in the specialty of drug and alcohol recovery and treatment. His passion lies in helping others achieve sobriety and live fulfilling lives. He has a best-selling book called A Step Out of Darkness: How to Help Someone Enter Addiction Treatment and Walk with Them Through the Recovery. He also has extensive training and experience in trauma-informed care and restorative practices. And he received his master's degree from the International Institute of Restorative Practice. And he not only has professional experience, but he has walked his own path of recovery for over a decade. So I'm really thrilled that you have accepted to be on this podcast and share your wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. M. I really appreciate you having me on the show today. Just really looking forward to this opportunity to speak with you today.
So, let's start. I mean, this is such a timely discussion because I think one of the few shops that haven't lost money besides the big tech industries is the liquor stores. So
Yes.
they have done very well in this time period. And so maybe, why don't we start actually, if you don't mind, a little bit about your story, because I find that many times as healers, our own story sort of informs our passion and the resolve to help other people. If we've either received the help or if we've been searching for the help forever. So
Yeah.
I'm happy that you share, a bit your real experience and and how you decided to go into this field.
Sure. No, absolutely. And I think that's great, saying receiving the help. Because that was something I wasn't willing to do for a long time. And that's really how I ended up coming into the position I am now. When, I think growing up, I always looked at, I know I was always looking to experiment, we'll say just a kind of a higher level of consciousness. I was always very like thrilled by that. And I even looked at like drinking, and even in my family and the culture I grew up in, was almost like a rite of passage. So it was these things that you went for. So now for me, I started before the legal age, and it was when I turned 15 years old, actually, it was on my birthday that I went to my first treatment center.
Mm.
And yeah, so when you kind of look around for signs, looking back on it, it's kind of clear. It's clear to me now that says, you know, um, what the if you say the universe or higher power or God was telling me something on that day, that hey, listen, I think you want to take a look at that. So, and I stayed sober for about 45 days. I enjoyed the treatment center. They asked me questions and had me doing some internal thinking and internal dialogue, and looking at my community as a large whole, and so that helped me move along. I mean, I'm from a family. I mean, there's no trauma. There's nothing that really drastically happened in my family. I grew up in the suburbs. like
Yeah.
we were able to leave our doors unlocked, that kind of thing. So there was nothing of that nature. But going to treatment, just to kind of expose some things, and I realized, hey, listen, even at this age, there were things that I was searching for and things that I was kind of wrestling with. And I stayed sober for 45 days and then said, yeah, I can't imagine being sober for the rest of my life. What about weddings and graduations and all those kind of things? And so I just went back out, and I went back out, and I was using different substances for many years. And unfortunately, it wasn't until a couple decades later where I did get sober. And in the meantime, there was a lot of lost relationships. There was a lot of, just not even the damage to the relationships. I kind of knew it was happening, but if I could separate myself enough, the addiction wanted to separate itself enough from all that for me to really kind of be addressing that. But once I did get sober, I dove in. Like I think that me always searching for that higher level of consciousness, and also having the treatment center early on, I was open to taking a deeper look into myself. And as I started to unpack some of those things, I it was just really weird. I kind of fell into a job working with at-risk youth, and then
Mm,
that kind of moved me on to, while I was doing that, I was working on my master's, and then ended up working in a treatment center. And it was just like all these things, like I fell into becoming a counselor. And like that's one of the number one things they tell you not to do in recovery is to become a counselor, because many people will treat that as their own recovery.
mm,
However, I was able to, separate the profession from
right.
my own recovery. And so I moved along. I moved along in that. I saw, what happened to me a lot was during that time. I mean, I could tell you how many times I was working with the same family over and over again. Because statistically speaking, it's 8 times before 8 different treatment episodes before somebody actually gets sober.
Mm,
So I kept seeing that there was nothing there for the family. Absolutely, the guy, everything was really geared around the individual and their own recovery.
mhm,
And this happened, all the way through. I was counseling. I ended up working for the county, auditing treatment centers. And I felt like, yeah, hey, this was the time where I really arrived. But I realized that there were still just these cracks missing. I went on, I became a clinical director from there, and realized again, you're dealing with a larger system. And so yeah, I was kind of just going, home one day, and I was like, I kind of felt like, hey, what am I doing with all this stuff? You've had the recovery experience, you've worked through all these different, all these different treatment centers, the county. And I was just like, your family's still missing something. And so at that point I was like, you know what, I'm going to take everything that I know, I'm just going to pour it out into a book and give it to families. I wanted to level the playing field for them, so
mm,
that they could be aware of some of the basic things that they need to do, as they're walking alongside their loved one who's in recovery. And that was the book that you mentioned. And
mhm, mhm,
after I did that, one of the guys that I work with, who's really like a mentor, really made it clear to me that, like, look, you have the book out now. Well, where are they going to go to? So I did the terrifying leap of, going out there and opening my own practice,
mhm,
and saying, okay, in conjunction with some of the other things that I do, um, I'll be available for those families. So,
mhm.
so
Wow.
yes, yeah.
So how like so when you were 15, how did you end up in the treatment center? Was it like family telling you to go there, or you
Yeah,
decided, like, what was your kind of sign that, because not everyone does that at 15, right? So
sure. Well, what happened for me was, it was like a Saturday night, coming home from actually a party. And a couple people that I knew, oddly enough, different friends were like, no, you need to stay with me, no, you need to stay with me, that kind of stuff, because it was just really, I was highly intoxicated. And then I was just like, no, no, I'm going home. And I ended up stumbling home. And there's a really longer story with that, but I eventually, the police ended up kind of picking me up on the side of the road. And while I was stumbling home. And so I went down to the police station. And a 15-year-old shouldn't be that intoxicated. That's not a normal thing. And so that I had to go through like a council. And I was given the option. Do you want to go to treatment, or do you want to, kind of pursue a little bit further of a judicial path? So, again, I was fortunate enough to have that opportunity.
yeah, yeah.
And I'm really grateful for it, because, although I didn't get sober at that time, that was absolutely the catalyst to,
Mhm,
when I did get sober, that it was like easier for me to kind of put on that focus and keep going.
mhm. So did you do any of the more conventional things like um, alcohol anonymous, or did you do any of that in your experience, or
Yes, absolutely. I have, and I still do attend Alcoholics Anonymous, but I'd say saved my life.
Mhm.
It's just, going through the 12-step process, which is a continual process. And but it allowed me to kind of take that snapshot of saying, okay, here's a blueprint for your life.
Mhm.
How do you want to go about, what do you want to do? How far down the rabbit hole do you want to go?
Mhm.
And that was something that absolutely so grateful for,
Mhm.
because it was something that I needed. And great thing about Alcoholics Anonymous or any of the 12-step programs, because like Al-Anon,
Right.
or Nar-Anon, is another program that I really encourage families to go to, because the very same 12 steps that the individuals in like AA or NA are going through are the same exact ones that they're asking those who will go to Al-Anon or Nar-Anon, because it's giving you that idea, that ability to take that introspective look at
Mhm.
yourself,
Mhm.
and it gives you the community around you
Right.
to to that, like, really, that's what strengthens us.
The
It's the
community.
people that we're
Yeah.
around.
Mhm. Mhm. And in how you work with people, is there something that you find like really essential or important from your own experience as a practitioner and reaching out? What are the, like, if you were to say the three top things, or you can do as many as you want, but what do you find is really important
Yeah.
in the recovery process and the support of it, both actually?
Yeah, and I'll kind of, maybe I'll work back a little bit, but one of the main things I see now, whether I still work with individuals, like I said, my book is just for the families, and I like engaging with the families because there's nothing really there
Mm.
for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
But even when I work with like an individual, what I always say is like looking at breaking through that, like that pain, shame, and embarrassment caused by addiction, right? We call it like a substance abuse disorder. That's kind of changed within the DSM-5, the diagnosis, right? To kind of help get away even just some of that kind of stigmatism that comes behind that. And honestly, that is, I think, one of the big pieces that happens when you get involved in a community. And I often say, hey, listen, get involved with 12 step. I would highly suggest that. But if it's your karate group or your book group or somebody else, get people around you who you're going to be able to kind of open up to
Mhm.
break those things. I relate this to, there's a Grant Cluck study done out at Harvard University. It's still, I think it's in like its 77th year or something, but it was a longitudinal study. Guys like JFK were in it, and what it was looking at, we were trying to find like what were the things people had in common. And
Mhm.
the only thing they found was this one thing: people who were happy were in what they called good relationships, right? So it's very key, like, because I think we always have this quest to be happy.
Mhm.
So it's okay, how can I do this? Like, because there's the one things like, well, I'm afraid to let people know, and this, I'm kind of embarrassed. So that means that I become isolated, and now it's just shutting off that community that could be around me. That's the very thing that could unlock some of those things within me that brings out that joy and that happiness that
Mhm.
that we all yearn for.
Mhm.
So I'd say is community is one. I'm sorry, were you going to ask something,
No, I
Dr.
was going to
M?
say it's interesting because it's like I just put this together, but I'm thinking when you're saying community is essential, but if the community you're in, you can't speak to, or you feel too much shame, right? It's an
Yeah,
interesting chicken and egg thing, because if you didn't have shame in the first place, you could talk to the community, because the community is not a homogenous group of people, right?
sure.
What happens in these communities that are specifically gathered around alcoholism or drug addiction, everyone has a joint experience on some level, right? So I
Yes,
guess it makes it easier, but it's true that if you're in any community where you dare to speak and you are saying, hey, I have this issue, you actually have the opportunity to be supported, right? From
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think I mean, just really honestly, that is a great segue into but really my second point is that like the family, I have always been a very big, being a counselor and being around the things that I've done, like even auditing treatment centers, folks really didn't have a lot of family sessions,
Mhm.
right? Now, when you think about it, right, if you just got session after session, hour after hour after hour, right? Like in reality, like why would you want to do a family session? Like that's a lot of work for the clinician,
Right. Yeah.
right? And it takes a lot more out of you, and you don't have those things. And again, I just seen it across the board. But there goes in the community that breaks down from the very beginning. And when they're not communicating with one another, there's a, there becomes, right, you're now fracturing the very things that you need to either have long-term sobriety, or bring back that happiness and bring back that family.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I really do look at it is communication techniques, and I look at a,
Mm-hmm.
a a wide variety of communication techniques. One of them, like my master's, is in restorative practices.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's, different approaches of, really doing things with people. And restorative practices in general, it's many of the ideas and concepts have been around for a long time. It's just really we've put it into this, like, explicit framework. And part of this, doing things with each other, and then also asking each other, certain questions, like in the past, present, and future tenses, when we're looking at a situation or looking to grow. So that would be like that other thing, is bringing that family now together,
Mm-hmm.
smashing through some of the shame and the guilt, and that everybody's going through, right?
Right. Right.
It's like the family members not thinking they're doing enough, right? Like that's one of the
Right.
big things, right? My identity as a parent, right, is I didn't do enough. So what am I gonna? I don't want to show anybody that. And then the individual who's suffering from the addiction, they're saying, like, I can't stop this. I mean, that's the one thing. I mean, coming from, having suffered from an addiction, I didn't mind. Like, there was a fun time where I was drinking and using, and it was good. It wasn't always bad, but then it got to be bad, and it got to be a point where every morning I was waking up and I didn't want to do it anymore, but
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't stop it. Like, there was no stopping it. So there's just this whole shame and feeling less than, and all of those things. So it's like being able to bring that and address those through communications with each other, that is so needed.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. But do you find that, and I'm curious, that sometimes the addictions come from an unresolved experience in their life, or an unspoken trauma? In your case, it didn't seem to be the case. Like you said, you lived in a happy background. There was
Yeah.
no real reason. Like, do you have do you have further insight on, or what is your understanding of why you became addicted, and what is addiction for you?
Mhm. That's Dr. M. That is a big question, but I'll try and unpack at least a piece of it.
Sure.
Um, and and for me, I know a lot of it had to do, for me, it had a lot to do with self-identity.
Hmm.
I'm one of seven children, and I think there was just kind of like this go in the flow, and you kind of disappear. And so that there are some things that you just lose, and it's over a period of time that you just lose of yourself. And it became that natural. Like I said, I know for myself, I've always had a craving to, like the supernatural. I've always, and that's why, like, utilizing substances, expanding the mind and experiencing something I don't get to experience, on a normal basis, right?
Hmm.
And I would say, is, I think a lot of people really have that same challenge. I mean, I've yet to meet anybody,
Hmm.
who in their moment of despair, and their life was not going good, did not cry out to something and say, hey, I need help.
Hi, it's Dr. Manon, and I just wanted to take a moment, commercial break, to ask you to subscribe to my podcast and kindly leave a comment if you're enjoying this. And also, just to let you know, I have tips for people in health looking for solutions to just a variety of issues. It's more like an attitude of health, and they're entertaining short videos, and you can find those under drmanonbolliger.com/tip. The link is here, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Like, and I think we
Oh
have
yeah,
that.
totally. Yeah. But
that
it
it,
also can be for the desire for expansion as well, right? You
mhm,
know, like I know when I was young, I was very interested in trying um, like most drugs that were available,
yeah,
and I did love the mind expansion
yes,
and that it actually to me allowed me to see. So I didn't do it personally. It wasn't like out of um, sadness. It was really out of curiosity and I loved that it expanded my mind.
yeah,
And I still honor those times for having changed my perspective on things, making me understand that we don't all share the exact same reality.
yeah.
We're triggered differently. We have different experiences, different traumas, etc. But it's interesting. At what point, because I have a running joke that I gave it all up when I was 17, which, it seems like that's when people start. No, actually, now it starts significantly younger than that.
Yeah.
But but what do you think the pull is? The addictive pull towards repeating and losing yourself in it. Or what do you think the components are? I know there's plenty written on this, so
Mhm.
it's not an encyclopedia, but your personal feeling, what do you feel? And yeah.
Yeah, well, and to your point, I really do like one of the things I do honor is the mind expansion that I had. Like I was a very very wound up child, and was almost like reverted to almost to like anger tendencies. However, when I had gone through some substances, it kind of just it changed. It opened my mind, and I think it's very important to honor that. Like I said, it wasn't always bad, you
Hmm.
know
Right.
and and I think that that goes right along with why a lot of people, right, like just think about it. I think so many of us, like a large portion of us are we're craving the supernatural. Like it's why, like, whatever it was, the Walking Dead was so
Mhm.
right, everybody loved it, and then before that it was the vampires, right, and all those series, right, because we're all going after this, right? We all kind of we're looking for it. And then I think, what happens is in some folks, right? Now, definitely we know genetically,
Mhm.
right, that there are genes out there. There are the addiction genes out there. So it's like if you've got it, you have to be watching out for it. Like it'll be I have two young children right now, but I'm ready to have that conversation with them when that time comes. Does that mean that they're going to have the addiction? No. I mean, I come from a family, not everybody's addicted, like
Right.
so you do want to be aware of that. And then the other one happens too is it is like it's just like, you know if you do something enough times, if you're putting something in your body enough time, it's like that muscle memory. Your cells
Right.
begin to do that. So, and you don't realize it over a period of time. I mean, that's one of the biggest problems that we had with um, the opioid pain prescriptions, right? Because they're saying, hey, listen, just take this once a day, twice a day, three. So if it feels bad, all this. Now
Yeah.
you've been doing it for over 30 days, right? And now
Mhm.
you're addicted and you
Yeah.
didn't even know it. Like you weren't even aware of it.
Because
Yeah.
I found it interesting finding out from Vietnam that a lot of the vets came back, though they had opium. I think I forget it was in Dr. Gabor Mate's book, but it was a very small percentage that actually stayed or addicted that really wanted this. But the vast majority, though they say heroin's addictive and etc., were fine when the I mean, not necessarily fine from the war. Let me
Yeah.
clarify that, but they were fine on the level of they didn't seem to have any biological drive for
Yeah.
that. Now, in isolation and all of the other concurrent realities that or missing limbs, whatever might be happening, or the atrocities, yes, you can go down another loop, but it's
Yeah.
not really. It's different than the biological pull from what
Yeah.
I'm understanding. Is that Is that a fair understanding, or?
I think that is another piece of it, so like you've got that, the other piece, and that really goes back to also that idea. There's a great park, the rat park study, right? I think that might be some of what you're alluding to, is when we change our community and where we're in, because if you're walking around every day underneath this intense, am I going to die? Or, I just saw my friend blow up an hour ago. What's going on, and what's my day going to be like? Am I going to be able to make it through here? So under that absolute intense pressure all the time, your life looks different. And then when you come home, now sometimes things just change, and that was a lot of what they found with a lot of the veterans. But it's the same thing that we're happening with everybody coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. We're having a very high population of folks who are experience trauma and the PTSD, and and then just being addicted to the painkillers across the board.
Mhm.
So yeah, why it affects some people one way, I really wish I knew. I mean, and to share this, like what I always say too is, I think part of breaking through that pain, shame, and embarrassment, right, or that guilt that somebody has, is that we feel that we're not strong enough.
Mhm.
Right. Like we go, oh, well, so I'm not strong enough. Like I'm supposed to, only the fittest survive. Right. And everything in my culture is teaching me I have to do it on my own and be
Right.
successful.
Yeah.
However, now I volunteered as an EMT for a couple years, and I did it in in a kind of like a suburb, a dangerous town. And some things that I had seen, like pulling people out of a car, if their tractor trailer runs over them and there's blood spurting out everywhere and it's hitting people, and you're just, that didn't bother me. Like,
Mhm.
so does that, is that, a problem? But, then maybe I would get a call, and, there would be like a grandma, who broke like her wrist, and like that kind of got to me. And, and then you'd have
Mhm.
the opportunity of processing out in the way you needed to. So I think when we start looking at that, where there's how whatever the size of the event doesn't mean that that's what has to,
No,
um,
no. And often, triggers, small triggers can trigger bigger things
yes.
depending on, because that's the nature of trauma. It catalogs the memories, right? And so we get re-triggered by, that's why in some relationships, something said and we're like, you know, don't you dare or whatever. And it's like, wait a minute, that's so unwarranted for what was actually said. But it's because we're carrying the unprocessed trauma of, of earlier,
Yeah.
which I think, yeah, there's a lot of inner work. And I'm going to ask you, you're still telling me all the points, right? Or should I just keep?
I think so. Like
Oh,
I just having a good conversation with you.
it is supposed to be conversations. So I got no particular agenda,
Uh,
but one of the concerns I have, and I'm just wondering if it is one of yours or not at all, and I'm fine with either, but is so in my practice as a naturopathic medical doctor, I have the right to diagnose, and I often receive a diagnosis from another, GP or another person. And a big part of my work is the unlabeling and the moving away from the diagnosis, because with every diagnosis comes a prognosis, and the prognosis are usually a very ugly picture of
mhm.
what actually doesn't need to be. It's a version of what can happen, but it's not by any means the only version. And so, what I have found is that by removing the hold of the diagnosis and really looking at what's underneath and what's causing people the stressors, the triggers, getting really to the bottom of their life, um, there's in that freedom, they're able to resolve, pretty well, any condition. I'm never allowed to use the word cure because I guess that would be too optimistic.
Mhm.
but but let's say, well, it's actually illegal in my practice to use the word cure, so we don't. But
Remission.
Yeah, forever remission.
Rested remission. Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Something good, something, but the
Yeah.
point is it's no longer in their lives. They don't need to think about it. They don't need to worry about it. They don't need to consider it. They're so past it that they're not even survivors of it. It's
Hmm.
done. It's out of their inner psyche, their outer, like just it's gone. And I'm curious, when people in some organizations more so than others really get you to identify yourself as I am an alcoholic. It's almost that's my name, or I'm a, how do you like I'm feeling like it's dated. Like I
Hmm.
don't know, but I'm not in the field. So
Sure.
what are your thoughts on that?
So I mean, it really is. It is a beautiful question. I believe that there's so much power in life in the words that we use. I absolutely believe that, and I think diagnosis is for those are something that can get somebody stuck. I've always believed that, and so one of the things that happens. So when I'm working with an individual who's suffering from a substance abuse problem,
Mhm.
they determine whether or not they're alcoholic, addict, or whatever. They have to be the ones to name it if that's what they want to name it. Like if they're trying, because we want to kind of be aware of what the problem is.
Mm,
And I think where 12 step kind of gets a very bad rap on this is that it's one thing to say, hey, listen, I am an alcoholic, right? However, if you've been in the program and you're continuing to work the steps, because it's not like you just work the steps and you're done. Like you don't get a certificate. Like here's your
okay.
college diploma, or here's it's just it's a lifestyle change. So if anybody ever says like, oh, I already did those meetings, like that's when I'm like red bells go off in my brain. Like, okay, I'm listening to hear what you experienced because it says you recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body.
Mhm, mhm,
So that's that other part of that alcoholic, right? Like, so there's like that, as we move through life, right? We're continuing to, I think every day, and, all your listeners and yourself, right? We're always looking to get better.
mhm.
But part of that process is saying, yeah, this was a problem that I had,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And now here's where I'm moving to. Like I have recovered from this, right? I guess right, I'm not cured. Again,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
idea that I'm not cured,
Mhm.
but I have now recovered from this, and this is where this
Right.
is where I'm moving, and this is where my life is going.
Mhm. So, but outside of the chemical component or the genetic slash chemical component of the addiction, do you think that people who have either proclaimed themselves to be or have been drinking, is there a time where if they've healed the work, I mean the deeper reasoning, so outside of this biological thing or when
Mhm,
you're really allergic to alcohol or whatever it might be,
mhm.
but when you've done that work, is there such a thing as moderation or the occasional or drink, or do you think that what is your attitude on that? Because
Oh, so my attitude is that it really depends. Like I've worked with individuals, right? So they get a DUI and they come to work with me, right? And they're like, yeah, I'm just not drinking and driving again. Like their life doesn't have to alter that much. And then there's other individuals who are like, well, I'm going to get an apartment that's right near the bar so that I could just walk across the street, right? Like there's a little bit of a difference of opinion, you know what I mean?
yeah,
So
yeah, totally,
it, it really depends upon where they are. Like, and this is what I think is so amazing. So like to be able to work within families, right? Because so like the families that I like I work with, right? They've tried everything. They feel like they've tried everything. They feel
yeah.
like there's no hope. Like there's nothing else that they can do that's going to make things change. That they're tired of the arguments in the house. They're tired
Right.
of walking around on eggshells. They're tired of wondering, being fearful every night when their loved one doesn't come home.
Yeah.
And then when they're home, they're fearful that like they wish just all this anxiety and craziness would stop.
Yeah.
And like I look at that and I say like, so there's two things that I say. So like that's really like that family, that's like
Mhm.
that family addiction spiral, right?
Yeah.
Because there's so much wrapped in there. And that's where I've moved on, and my practice is called like family sobriety now, because we have to look at that spiral, and we
Yeah.
have to figure out what are those things that are just keep us twisted in this,
Mhm, mhm.
and then just kind of pull a little piece out each time, and then to build this entire family being sober.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, because I guess within the family, you know, there's so many different opinions
Yeah,
possibly that also cause and the dynamic itself, right? That can predate all of this, which plays into it. So it's very hard to, yeah, you have to you have to see the whole picture. You can't
yeah,
just
yeah.
treat the one person and say, oh, that's the person that's got the issue, because it is a dynamic if they're in a dynamic, you know.
And
Yeah.
and I say too with families, like, look, I've had, look, probably the number one thing I hear is, right, as I said, there's like it's 8 times before somebody, 8 different treatment episodes before somebody gets sober, right? That's just the average. So that means you have people who are going to them 20 times,
Mhm.
right, to balance out the guys who go there twice or once.
Right.
And one of the biggest things is that families are like, I'm done. You told me 4 treatments episodes before that you were changing. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore.
Right.
And that's the individual has to work with that. So it's identifying who is the family in their life.
Mhm.
And one of the greatest ones ever was, I was working with an individual and he said, listen, I've got nobody. And I said, let's tease this out. And we were able to identify the fact that his probation officer knew him the most because he's had a 10-year relationship with him. And
Right.
so we brought him in, right?
Yeah.
And as a for a part of a family session, and that unlocked other things to be able to bring other people within his community, even like a family member back, like it was. And those were things that he's still sober today.
Mm.
And so it's like we get to work with the pieces that are there, and it's okay if some family members don't want to work together. That's okay,
Mhm.
but let's start with where we can, because we can make those changes.
Mhm. Wow. Well, I think our time is almost up, but is there any last pieces you would like to share? I feel like we went in many ways, but is there any main point that we've missed that you feel is really important for people to hear?
Um, I just, the number one thing is I want to say is to any families that are out there is, first of all, it's not your fault. There's nothing you could have done. There's nothing anybody in my family that could have done anything
Mhm.
to have changed what I did.
Mhm.
And so I always say that, so that's a really, that like it's so essential, so key, because you're working so hard to try and to get things together. um, and the second thing I'd say is, if your loved one even remotely mentions the word, like they think they need help, or that, hey, I looked at this treatment center, drop whatever you're doing and go take them there.
Mhm.
Don't wait an hour, don't wait a day, don't wait a week,
Mhm.
because at that moment in time when they have said that, they've been thinking it probably for months, if not years. But for them to kind of verbalize it,
Mhm.
and then if nobody acts upon it, you really lessen that window kind of closed
Mhm.
for you. So I would definitely say that those are two things, that absolutely I would say is, to look at.
Okay.
Can I also just say one other
Yeah,
thing, Dr. M? I know we are
absolutely.
closing out. For your viewers today, like, I would be happy to give you a free copy of my book if you'd like. If you just, even my name is Joseph B as in Bravo, Devlin.com. Just, if you can go to there, you can email me and I will send you over a copy. I'd be happy to do that for any of your listeners.
Great. Yeah, and we could put that, well, you might not want it on the link, but do you have a link where people could get the book as well?
Yes, I do. Absolutely.
Okay, so we could put that link too, in case people need to see it in writing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay, great. Well, anyway, it was a real pleasure to have you, and thank you for sharing all that information.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. I really do appreciate it. It's been a great time, speaking with you, and I'm always open for any kind of conversation. So whether a listener or yourself, I'd love to further the conversation.
thank you for joining us at the Healers Café with Dr. Manon. For more information, go to drmanonbolliger.com.